The conference room door clicked shut behind Marcus Webb, and the sound fell final. I sat frozen, my laptop still open, merger projections glowing on the screen. My team surrounded the table, waiting for me to lead the discussion we'd prepared for weeks. Then Marcus said it, his voice calm and rehearsed like he'd practiced in front of a mirror. "Morgan, you're off the merger team. Effective immediately." My hand stopped moving above the keyboard. "What?" "We need someone more flexible on this. You're too rigid with the numbers. Too cautious." The words landed like stones in my chest. Every muscle in my body went tight. 3 months of work. My charts, my projections, my late nights, rebuilding risk models nobody else understood. Gone. Erased like I'd never existed. I wanted to stand up and demand answers. I wanted to throw my laptop across the polished table and watch his face change. Instead, I sat perfectly still, letting something cold and sharp settle over me. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. I just nodded once and closed my computer. I am Morgan Hayes, and I don't react in anger. I plan in silence. I walked back to my office with steady steps, even though my heart was slamming against my ribs. The hallway felt longer than usual, fluorescent lights humming overhead. People passed me without looking up, unaware that something had just been stolen from me in that conference room. I sat down at my desk and stared at the team roster on my monitor. My name was already gone from the merger project list. Someone had removed it while I was still sitting in that meeting. I clenched my fists under the desk, forcing my breathing to slow down. Anger and pain collided inside my chest, but I held them there. Controlled, contained, dangerous. I opened a blank document and started typing. Not a complaint, not an email to HR. A list. Every detail I knew about the merger. Every connection I'd built. Every weakness in Marcus's understanding of the deal. The fury didn't disappear. It just changed shape. It became something quieter, colder, more useful. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment Marcus said those words. Too rigid, too cautious, like being thorough was a flaw instead of the reason the merger had gotten this far in the first place. This wasn't just any project. This was my idea. I'd been the one who identified the acquisition target 6 months ago. I'd built the initial financial model. I'd made the first contact with their CFO at a conference in Boston. Marcus had taken my work, presented it to senior leadership, and somehow convinced everyone it was a team effort. Now, he'd removed me from that same team like I was dead weight. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, scrolling through every email, every document, every presentation I'd created. The merger was built on my connections and my strategy. 3 months of sleepless nights. Negotiations I'd handled personally. Calculations nobody else had bothered to verify. He'd erased me, but he hadn't erased the work. And that work had his name on it now, which meant every mistake became his responsibility. The next morning, I started analyzing everything Marcus had presented to the board. I didn't do it loudly. I didn't tell anyone. I just pulled up the files and began looking for cracks. It didn't take long to find them. His revenue projections were inflated by nearly 15%. He'd miscalculated the integration costs. His timeline for regulatory approval ignored 2 critical state requirements I'd flagged in my original notes. Every flaw was a small crack in the armor he thought was invincible. I created a new folder on my computer. Private. Password protected. Inside, I started documenting every oversight, every weak assumption, every gap in his logic. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I needed clarity. I needed to understand exactly how fragile his version of my work really was. By lunch, I had 17 separate issues listed. By the end of the day, I had 23. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt focused, methodical, calm in a way that scared me a little. Naomi Kim appeared at my office door after most people had left for the day. She was a junior analyst, the kind of person who sat quietly in meetings and noticed everything. She knocked softly, even though the door was open. "Can I come in?" I nodded, closing the document I'd been working on. She stepped inside and shut the door behind her. "I know what happened. With the merger team." I waited. "Marcus doesn't see the holes you do," she said quietly. "He's already making mistakes in the integration planning. Big ones." I studied her face. No sympathy. No drama. Just facts. "Can you document them?" I asked. She nodded. I already started. That was when I realized I wasn't alone. Naomi had access to files I didn't anymore. She attended meetings I'd been excluded from. Together, we could map every weakness in Marcus's plan without him ever knowing. I didn't need to confront him. I needed information. And now I had a source. "Keep it quiet," I said. She smiled slightly. "Always do." 3 days later, the acquiring company's CFO called me directly. Not Marcus. Not the merger team. Me. His name was Vincent Caruso, and we built a solid working relationship during the early negotiations. The call felt casual at first, just checking in, nothing official. But I knew better. Vincent didn't make casual calls. "How's the integration planning going on your end?" he asked. I paused. This was the moment. I could tell him I wasn't on the team anymore. I could let Marcus handle it. Or I could do what I'd been doing for weeks. Prepare. Anticipate. Correct mistakes before they became disasters. "It's moving forward," I said carefully. "There are a few areas that need tightening. Do you have time to walk through some projections?" We spent an hour on the phone. I guided him through revised numbers, flagged risks Marcus had ignored, and answered questions with the kind of detail that only comes from months of deep work. I never mentioned Marcus. I didn't need to. Vincent could hear the difference between someone who understood the deal and someone who was pretending. When we hung up, I felt something shift. Quiet power. Invisible, but undeniable. The first crack appeared during a board meeting 2 weeks later. I wasn't supposed to be there, but my director asked me to sit in and take notes. Marcus stood at the front of the room, presenting updated financials. He moved through the slides confidently, his voice smooth and certain. Then someone asked about the integration timeline. Marcus hesitated. Just for a second. He glanced at his notes, fumbled slightly, and gave an answer that contradicted the projections he'd shown 3 slides earlier. I saw the board members exchange glances. One of them frowned. Another leaned forward and asked a follow-up question Marcus couldn't answer cleanly. I sat in the back corner, pen in hand, face completely neutral. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I just observed. The whispers started after the meeting ended. Quiet conversations in hallways, concerns being raised. People were beginning to notice what I'd known for weeks. Marcus Webb didn't understand this merger as well as he claimed, and I had been waiting for that realization to land. Over the next month, I became the invisible engine of the merger. Not officially, not publicly, but through careful emails, strategic phone calls, and quiet guidance to Vincent and his team, I kept the deal moving forward. Marcus tried to assert his authority in meetings, but people were starting to bypass him. They'd ask questions he couldn't answer, then reach out to me afterward for clarification. I never corrected him in public. I never contradicted him directly. I just made sure the right information reached the right people at the right time. Naomi fed me updates from the merger team meetings. Marcus had missed another regulatory deadline. He'd presented cost projections that didn't account for employee severance. He'd promised timeline commitments he couldn't possibly meet. Each mistake was small on its own. Together, they painted a picture of someone who was in over his head. I stayed calm, logical, unshakable. I didn't celebrate the small victories. I just kept moving forward, one careful step at a time, building something Marcus couldn't see yet. By mid-October, the tension had shifted. Marcus's arrogance, which had always been irritating but manageable, was now costing him credibility. He didn't see it yet, but I did. Every board presentation became a test he barely passed. Every client call revealed gaps in his knowledge. And every time someone came to me with questions, I answered them with a precision he couldn't match. I started advising on integration issues Vincent's team flagged. Not officially, not in any formal capacity, but privately they trusted me. They knew I understood the details. They knew I wouldn't give them incomplete information just to sound confident. One afternoon, Marcus sat in a conference call with the acquiring company, trying to explain a financial model he clearly didn't understand. I watched from across the table as his answers became vague, defensive. Vincent asked pointed questions. Marcus fumbled. The room went quiet. Afterward, Vincent called me. "Can we talk through that model again? Just you and me." I smiled to myself. Calm. Always calm. Of course. The acquirer asked me to advise on a critical integration issue involving IT systems. It wasn't a public request. No announcements. No emails copying Marcus. Just a private message from Vincent asking if I had time to consult. I did. We spent 2 hours on a video call, mapping out data migration timelines, identifying security risks, and building contingency plans Marcus hadn't considered. Marcus wasn't even aware the call had happened. A week later, during a merger team meeting I wasn't officially part of, someone referenced the IT integration plan I'd helped create. Marcus looked confused. He asked who had developed it. Naomi, sitting quietly in the corner, said my name. The room went silent. Marcus's face went red, but he recovered quickly, nodding like he'd known all along. But the damage was done. People had seen his confusion. They'd watched him scramble. I sat in my office afterward, staring out the window at the city below, and felt absolutely nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. Just clarity. He was sinking in slow motion, and I was simply watching it happen. I began drafting a full leadership restructuring proposal. It started as notes, scattered ideas about how the post-merger organization should function. Then it became something more. A detailed plan outlining roles, responsibilities, reporting structures. Every flaw Marcus had revealed, every risk he'd left unmitigated, every critical oversight became part of my framework. I wasn't doing this out of revenge. I was doing it because someone needed to. The merger was too important to fail because of one person's ego. I worked on it late into the night, cross-referencing organizational charts, financial models, integration timelines. I identified which leaders from both companies had the skills to manage the transition. I outlined communication strategies, performance metrics, accountability structures. Everything was backed by data. Nothing was based on emotion. By the time I finished the first draft, it was 3 a.m. I saved the file, encrypted it, and sent a copy to my personal email. Then I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. This wasn't just a proposal. It was a blueprint for replacing Marcus without ever saying his name. Every day, I collected more evidence. Decisions Marcus made in meetings. Memos he sent with incorrect information. Financial projections that contradicted earlier commitments. I didn't frame any of it as betrayal or incompetence. I just documented facts, dates, numbers, outcomes. Naomi helped. She'd forward me emails Marcus sent to the team, often with glaring errors I'd have to quietly correct through back channels. She'd record notes from meetings where Marcus made promises he couldn't keep. Together, we built an archive of his mismanagement that was impossible to argue with. I kept everything organized in folders, labeled by date and topic. Financial oversight, timeline failures, communication breakdowns, regulatory risks. If anyone ever questioned my assessment, I had proof. Not opinions, not accusations, just undeniable patterns of poor judgment. Marcus was digging his own grave. I was just keeping track of how deep it was getting. And every time he made another mistake, I felt a little calmer, a little more certain. He'd done this to himself. I was simply making sure nobody could ignore it anymore. During a board meeting in early November, Marcus made a comment that directly contradicted data I'd provided to Vincent 3 days earlier. He claimed the integration costs would stay under budget. I knew they wouldn't. I'd already identified a $7 million gap in his calculations, and Vincent's team had confirmed it. One of the board members, an older woman named Patricia, who never missed details, raised her hand. "Marcus, that number doesn't match what the acquiring team shared with us last week." Marcus turned red. He stammered something about updated projections, about recalculating assumptions. Patricia didn't look convinced. Neither did anyone else. I sat in my usual spot near the back taking notes. My face showed nothing. No satisfaction. No judgment. Just professional neutrality. But inside, I felt the shift happening. People were starting to question him openly. The cracks weren't hidden anymore. After the meeting, Patricia stopped me in the hallway. "Morgan, do you have the actual integration cost analysis?" I did. I'd been carrying it in my laptop for weeks, waiting for someone to ask. "I'll send it to you within the hour." She nodded. "Good, because I don't trust his numbers anymore." Vincent and I started meeting regularly, always in private, always off the official calendar. We'd video call late in the evening after Marcus had gone home. Vincent would walk me through concerns his team had raised, and I'd provide analysis, context, solutions. He trusted me in a way he'd never trusted Marcus. One night, Vincent said something that confirmed what I'd been building toward. "Morgan, I'm going to be honest with you. We're not confident in Marcus's ability to manage this integration. He talks a good game, but when we dig into the details, things fall apart." I stayed quiet, letting him continue. "We need someone who actually understands this deal. Someone who can execute without drama." He paused. "That's you." I chose my words carefully. "I'm happy to help however I can, but I'm not officially on the merger team anymore." Vincent's expression hardened. "That's going to change." I didn't argue. I didn't celebrate. I just nodded and moved the conversation forward. Professional, calm, focused. Marcus wasn't in the room. He didn't even know this conversation was happening. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I began drafting contracts, communication plans, and integration timelines with the kind of precision that made mistakes impossible. Every document was airtight. Every clause anticipated potential problems. Every timeline included buffer periods for delays. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving Marcus wrong. It was about making sure the merger succeeded despite him. Naomi reviewed drafts and caught details I'd missed. Together, we built a system that didn't rely on Marcus's approval or oversight. We routed everything through Vincent's team, who had final authority on integration decisions. Marcus thought he was still in charge, but the actual work was happening around him, quietly, efficiently, without his involvement. I worked methodically, one document at a time, one decision at a time. No rushing, no shortcuts, just careful, deliberate progress. The kind of work that doesn't make noise but gets results. And every time Marcus tried to insert himself into the process, Vincent's team would politely redirect him, citing timelines or protocols or technical details he didn't understand. He was becoming irrelevant, and he didn't even realize it yet. Marcus started noticing something was wrong in late November. People who used to come to him with questions were now emailing me instead. Decisions that used to require his approval were being made without consulting him. He'd send memos asserting his authority, reminding everyone that he was the lead on the merger. But the emails felt desperate, defensive. One afternoon, he stopped by my office. His smile was tight, forced. "Morgan, I've been hearing your name come up a lot in merger discussions." I looked up from my laptop. People have questions. I answer them. Right. But I'm still leading this project. If there are issues, they should come to me first. I nodded slowly. Of course. I'll make sure to loop you in. We both knew I wouldn't. He knew it too. He left my office without another word, and I watched him walk away, shoulders tense, stride a little too fast. He was panicking, quietly but clearly, and I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no guilt, just calm observation. He'd built this situation himself. I was just refusing to fix it for him. By early December, my leadership restructuring proposal was ready. I'd spent 6 weeks refining it, checking every detail, verifying every recommendation. It was flawless. The document outlined a complete post-merger organizational structure, identified key leaders from both companies, and created clear accountability frameworks that would prevent the kind of chaos Marcus had created. I included data on every major decision point, timelines for implementation, and metrics for measuring success. Nothing was vague. Nothing was based on personal preference. It was pure strategy, backed by financial analysis and operational reality. Marcus had no idea the proposal existed. Nobody did except Naomi and Vincent. I had kept it completely private, waiting for the right moment to present it. That moment was coming soon. Vincent had scheduled a final integration planning meeting with senior leadership from both companies. He'd asked me to prepare recommendations. I didn't tell him I'd already prepared a complete restructuring plan. I just confirmed I'd be ready. The trap was invisible, and it was about to close. The first major shift happened during a video call with the acquiring company's executive team. Vincent was presenting integration updates, and halfway through, he stopped and said something that changed everything. Before we continue, I want to publicly thank Morgan Hayes for her exceptional work on this merger. Her analysis and guidance have been critical to our success. The screen showed faces from both companies. People nodded. Someone started a slow clap that others joined. I sat in my office, alone, expression completely neutral. But my heart was pounding. Marcus was on the call too. I watched his face drain of color. Nobody applauded him. Nobody thanked him. The silence around his name was deafening. After the call ended, my phone buzzed with messages. Colleagues congratulating me. Vincent asking if we could schedule time to discuss next steps. Patricia sending a brief email that just said, "Well deserved." I closed my laptop and stared out the window. I'd done this without confrontation, without drama, without ever raising my voice. I'd simply let the work speak for itself. And now everyone could hear it. Over the following weeks, I guided every major integration decision. Marcus still attended meetings, but people stopped looking at him for answers. They looked at me. When questions arose, my name came up first. When problems needed solving, my phone rang. Each success made Marcus smaller. Each mistake he made became more obvious. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The system was doing the work for me. In one meeting, Marcus tried to override a timeline I'd established with Vincent's team. He insisted we could move faster, cut corners, save money. I stayed quiet while he explained his reasoning. Then Patricia asked me what I thought. I pulled up data showing why rushing would create compliance risks we couldn't afford. The room went silent. Marcus's suggestion was quietly ignored. Afterward, he cornered me in the hallway. "You're undermining me." I met his eyes calmly. "I'm doing my job." "You're making me look bad." "No," I said. "You're doing that yourself." He walked away without responding. And I went back to my office, sat down, and continued working. Calm, focused, untouchable. By mid-December, I had compiled everything. Every error Marcus had made, every oversight, every gap in his judgment. The documentation was complete, organized, undeniable. I didn't have to convince anyone emotionally. The facts were louder than his ego could ever be. I created a summary document, just 8 pages, outlining the pattern of mismanagement that had characterized the merger under Marcus's leadership. I included dates, specific examples, financial impacts. I showed how decisions he'd made had cost time and money. I demonstrated how his lack of preparation had created risks the acquiring company had flagged repeatedly. Then I showed how those same risks had been mitigated through alternative oversight. My oversight, without ever naming myself directly. The document simply presented two parallel tracks, one where Marcus led, one where someone else stepped in quietly to fix his mistakes. The contrast was devastating. I saved the file and encrypted it. I didn't send it to anyone yet. I just held it, knowing that when the right moment came, this document would end the conversation before it started. Vincent scheduled a final presentation with senior leadership from both companies. The meeting would determine the official post-merger leadership structure. He asked me to present recommendations for organizational design. Marcus assumed he'd be co-presenting. He wasn't. I spent 3 days preparing the presentation. Every slide was clear, direct, backed by data. I outlined the leadership structure, explained reporting relationships, identified key decision makers. I showed timelines, success metrics, accountability frameworks. Everything I'd been building for months was distilled into 30 slides. The night before the meeting, I ran through the presentation alone in my office. My voice was steady. My arguments were unassailable. I anticipated every question, every pushback, every concern. By the time I finished practicing, I knew the presentation was perfect. Marcus sent me an email asking what I planned to cover. I responded with a vague summary, nothing specific. He replied asking to review my slides. I told him I was still finalizing them. He didn't push back. He still thought he had control. He still thought this was his merger. Tomorrow he'd learn the truth. The meeting started at 9 a.m. The conference room was full. Senior executives from both companies, board members, Vincent and his entire leadership team. Marcus sat near the front, confident, relaxed. He thought this was a formality. I stood and began presenting. Slide by slide, I laid out the post-merger organizational structure. I explained why certain leaders were better suited for specific roles. I outlined integration timelines, communication strategies, performance metrics. Every recommendation was backed by analysis. Every decision was justified with data. Marcus tried to interrupt twice. Both times, Vincent quietly asked him to hold his questions until the end. Marcus's face reddened, but he stayed silent. I continued. Calm, precise, unshakable. When I reached the leadership appointments slide, I saw Marcus lean forward. His name wasn't where he expected it to be. He wasn't leading the integration. He wasn't even on the core team. He'd been reassigned to a minor advisory role with no direct reports and no decision-making authority. The room was silent. Then Patricia spoke. This structure makes sense. I moved to approve it. Someone seconded. The vote was unanimous. Marcus sat frozen, his mouth slightly open. I closed my laptop and sat down, expression neutral, heart calm. It was done. Within a week, Marcus was reassigned. His office was moved to a smaller space on a different floor. His assistant was reassigned to someone else. His calendar, once filled with high-level meetings, became empty except for occasional advisory calls nobody seemed to need. I saw him in the hallway once. He walked past me without making eye contact, shoulders tight, jaw clenched. His pride had been shattered, not through drama, not through confrontation, just through quiet, inescapable accountability. People stopped asking him questions. His emails went unanswered. The merger moved forward without him, faster and more efficiently than it had when he was in charge. Nobody missed his leadership. Nobody asked where he'd gone. I walked past his old office one afternoon. The door was open. The space was empty. Someone from facilities was boxing up the few items he'd left behind. I paused for just a moment, then kept walking. Calm, unbothered, focused on the work ahead. He'd tried to erase me. Instead, he'd erased himself. The board implemented my restructuring plan in early January. Teams realigned smoothly. Integration projects moved forward without delays. Communication between the two companies improved. Every metric we'd established showed progress. The merger, which had felt chaotic and uncertain under Marcus's leadership, now felt controlled and purposeful. People congratulated me constantly, in meetings, in emails, and passing conversations. Vincent called me personally to thank me for keeping the deal on track. Patricia sent a formal letter to my file commending my strategic leadership. My director, who'd barely spoken to me during the months I'd been off the merger team, suddenly wanted weekly check-ins to hear my insights. Every system, every process, every success now bore my mark. My voice was finally being heard, not because I demanded it, because I'd earned it through careful, methodical work that nobody could deny or diminish. Marcus's name faded from conversations. Mine replaced it, and I realized something strange. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt relieved, like something that had been pressing on my chest for months had finally lifted. I sat in my office late one evening in mid-January, alone, the city lights glowing through the windows. The merger was nearly complete. Integration was ahead of schedule. The new leadership structure was working exactly as I designed it. Everything I had built in silence was now functioning in daylight. No celebrations, no revenge thrills, just clarity. I thought about the moment Marcus had removed me from the team, how it had felt like erasure, how I'd wanted to scream, to fight, to demand recognition. Instead, I'd chosen a different path. I'd stayed calm. I'd documented everything. I'd built relationships, solved problems, and created value nobody could ignore. I'd turned betrayal into empowerment. I'd rewritten the rules without breaking them, without drama, without losing control. Marcus's arrogance had undone him. I hadn't needed to destroy him. He'd destroyed himself by underestimating the person he'd tried to erase. And I'd been there, quiet and patient, ready to step forward when the moment arrived. I smiled to myself. Morgan Hayes had survived, had thrived, had reclaimed her world. And for the first time in months, I could finally breathe. The final board meeting of the quarter happened on a cold January morning. I presented the merger completion report. Every milestone met, every financial target achieved, every integration challenge resolved. The room was silent as I finished. Then Patricia started clapping. Others joined. The applause felt genuine, earned. Afterward, Vincent pulled me aside. "We want you to lead the integration permanently. Full authority. Your title. Your team." I nodded. I'd be honored. Marcus wasn't at the meeting. Nobody asked where he was. His absence didn't matter anymore. He'd become a footnote, a cautionary tale about what happens when ego replaces competence. I walked back to my office, sat down at my desk, and opened my calendar. Meetings scheduled weeks in advance. Projects I'd be leading. Teams I'd be building. The future looked different now. Clearer. Mine. I thought about everything that had brought me here. The anger I'd transformed into focus. The betrayal I'd turned into opportunity. The silence I'd used as strategy. I closed my laptop and looked out at the city. The sun was breaking through clouds, light spilling across buildings. I felt calm, grounded, whole. Morgan Hayes had won without fighting, had succeeded without compromising, had proven that patience, precision, and quiet strength could reshape everything. And that was enough.